Welcome to Lost in Revision. All of our content is public domain, literature, fairy tales, and folklore. Our goal is to at least break even to cover our expenses, so any support that you can offer to help us reach that goal helps keep this podcast going and you entertained. All of our music is by Nathan Hubble and is used with his permission. Thanks, and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to Lost in Revision. Brought to you by hurricanes not being able to reach our power grid yet.
Yeah, got a little close here with the tornadoes. I hope Angel didn't get washed away, though.
No. It was headed straight for us, and then it hitched a little to the east, and we had nothing but clear skies. However, one of my best friends in Houston had a tree come through her roof in the middle of the storm, though. That was very scary stuff.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, there's lots of flooding in Houston. It was bad. Well, I am here as always with two of my favorite humans who you probably just heard if I recorded this correctly, Angel and Polly. How are you today, Angel?
Well, kind of meh with a muted yay on the side at the same time. I got the email today that my submission for Writers of the Future got honorable mention again.
Oh, that is phenomenal. Congratulations.
That is really impressive. I am sorry about the again, though.
Yeah. Again sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know. It's just that honorable mention is what I've gotten for every story I've submitted so far. And there are a little over 1,000 writers this quarter alone who would love to get honorable mention. It's just, I really loved this one. And yeah. But anyway, on to today's fun.
Well, I really loved that story too, and I can't wait to read it as a whole book or series.
No, it was super. It was super.
Thank you.
So, how are you today, Polly?
I'm getting along as usual. Yeah, just some random limbs down. Nothing major. Nothing on my property. Eli got a shout out last month, but as it turns out, his wife, Kat, has been a fan for almost a year now. Like, before I even knew her, he was trying to introduce her to this great podcast he found, and she's like, "Yeah, what's the name?" And he's like, "Lost in Revision." And she's like, "Yeah, I've been listening to that." So, hi, Kat.
That is hilarious. Hi, Kat. Welcome to the Lost in Revision family.
Oh, wow, that is fantastic. It's like finding a unicorn in the wild. Hi, Kat. Nice to know you exist.
Yes, we do love unicorns.
We love our listeners.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history and culture of this story?
The particular tale I have chosen is a Cornish tale, but the boy versus giant trope crosses borders and shares elements even more than the Cinderella trope does. Rather than variations on a theme, you will see the exact same elements from one story to another. For instance, the eating contest. In August last year, we had the Asbjornsen and Moe tale, the Ash lad who had an eating contest with a troll and won. It's a mouthful of a title. In today's tale, British Welsh folklorist Joseph Jacobs included the eating contest as a snippet in the greater tale. Now, whether he borrowed it from the Norse tale or the other way around is unknown. The eating contest also appears in a Canadian native folktale, The Boy Who Overcame a Giant. So it gets around.
Of course, the most well-known of the boy versus giant stories is the oft-remade Jack and the Beanstalk story. I think the earliest printing of that was the story of Jack Spriggins and the Enchanted Bean by J. Roberts in 1734, though the version Joseph Jacobs published in his collection of English fairy tales in 1890 is considered to be closer to the original oral traditions of the story. And most of the versions of the story we see produced today are based on the Jacobs version.
I just picked the most common one off of Gutenberg, our favorite source, because there's so many versions of so many tales.
As you do.
The boy versus giant trope is seen in Norse folklore in the Ash lad tales. Our young hero Askeladden is always battling trolls, which are giants born of stone. It's seen in British folklore, where the hero is usually named Jack, and includes the brave little tailor, Jack and the Beanstalk, and the giants are simply large, often ugly humans. Now, Greeks were fond of the trope as well, but their giants, or gigantes, was a race of great strength and aggression, but not necessarily great size. They were born of Gaia from the spilled blood of a titan. In Jewish tradition, giants are born of an unholy union between angels and human women. David and Goliath is probably one of the oldest boy versus giant tales, certainly one of the most well-known. It is predated by the story of Humbaba and Gilgamesh, in which the giant is led to trust the humans, and then is betrayed and killed. Mostly, early literature seems to use giants as adversaries to be killed.
I'm glad you mentioned the Epic of Gilgamesh, because that would be the oldest story that we have found to date, and the Bible is heavily derived from it. So
Yeah. I was trying to hit all the boys versus giants across history.
Well, speaking of David and Goliath, though, people always act like he just like threw a rock or had a little slingshot, when him taking that sling to the fight is more like Indiana Jones shooting the swordsman by technology standards of the time.
To be fair, it's more likely that the stone stunned or knocked out Goliath if he was wearing armor, and then the beheading did him in.
That'll do it.
Well, anyone who mocks the power of a sharp rock thrown by a sling definitely did not grow up with cousins who loved mastering different ways to silently wreak havoc on a farm. Even an ineptly tossed stone from a sling is enough to do some serious damage. Low tech does not equal less deadly.
Yes, so true. The slings of that time were powerful weapons. They weren't the little slingshots like you probably got shot with on that farm.
Yeah, but in the stories, boys don't always kill giants. British children's author and illustrator David Litchfield writes about friendly, helpful giants who have adventures with the boy in their stories. Oscar Wilde wrote The Selfish Giant, in which a giant learns compassion when a boy wishes to enjoy a beautiful garden which the giant doesn't wish to share.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking of favorites like the Big Friendly Giant and the Iron Giant. I think we end up watching the Iron Giant every couple of years, and I always end up in tears. And that one, the boy is definitely the giant's friend.
Yeah, in The Bridge to Terabithia, a school bully is stylized into a giant in their imaginations, and she's won over by acts of kindness, becoming an ally rather than an adversary.
And Bridge to Terabithia movie was so devastating, and I never could read the book.
Yeah, we watched it with the kids when it first came out, and I started crying the minute she invited him to the museum, because I knew what was coming. The kids were very concerned.
I still haven't watched it simply because of my daughter's reaction to the book, which let me know that it would destroy me. And I haven't been brave enough to wallow in those emotions yet.
Yeah, I just can't handle kid deaths. It's giving the watching Doctor Who silence in the library from the second watch through to current date.
Oh, sure. Just go ahead. Stab me in the heart. Ah, what an introduction to one of my favorite characters in the entire series. I need a River Song compilation. Just, the whole River Song saga.
As long as you add in Donna, because Donna's story in the library was just even more heartbreaking.
Yeah.
To me. River had her time with the Doctor.
I don't know if I need more warning of kid deaths or dog deaths. They're
probably equal for me.
One of my favorite books as a child, nobody died in it, was
That's rare.
The Book of Giant Stories by David L. Harrison, co-published in English and French in 1972. I enjoyed it far past the age when I was still reading picture books. I'd even give it a read now, but I don't have a copy, and I can't find one on any of the online libraries I've searched. The author is still quite active, so it's outside of our purview here.
Oh, that's too bad. It sounded really fun until you said it wasn't in the public domain. So let's move on to the reading of the story, and then we can discuss it after.
Jack the Giant Killer. When good King Arthur reigned, there lived near the Land's End of England, in the county of Cornwall, a farmer who had only one son, called Jack. He was brisk and of a ready, lively wit, so that nobody or nothing could worst him. In those days the Mount of Cornwall was kept by a huge giant named Cormoran. He was 18 feet in height, and about 3 yards round the waist, of a fierce and grim countenance, the terror of all the neighbouring towns and villages. He lived in a cave in the midst of the mount, and whenever he wanted food he would wade over to the mainland, where he would furnish himself with whatever came in his way. Everybody at his approach ran out of their houses, while he seized on their cattle, making nothing of carrying 6 oxen on his back at a time, and as for their sheep and hogs, he would tie them round his waist like a bunch of tallow dips. He had done this for many years, so that all Cornwall was in despair. One day Jack happened to be at the town hall when the magistrates were sitting in council about the giant. He asked, "What reward will be given to the man who kills Cormoran?" "The giant's treasure," they said, "will be the reward." Quoth Jack, "Then let me undertake it." So he got a horn, shovel, and pickaxe, and went over to the mount in the beginning of a dark winter's evening, when he fell to work, and before morning had dug a pit 22 feet deep and nearly as broad, covering it over with long sticks and straw. Then he strewed a little mould over it, so that it appeared like plain ground. Jack then placed himself on the opposite side of the pit, farthest from the giant's lodging, and just at the break of day he put the horn to his mouth and blew, "Tantivy, tantivy!" This noise roused the giant, who rushed from his cave, crying, "You incorrigible villain! Are you come here to disturb my rest? You shall pay dearly for this. Satisfaction I will have, and this it shall be. I will take you whole and broil you for breakfast." He had no sooner uttered this than he tumbled into the pit, and made the very foundations of the mount to shake. "O giant," quoth Jack, "where are you now? Oh, faith, you are gotten now into Lob's Pound, where I will surely plague you for your threatening words. What do you think now of broiling me for your breakfast? Will no other diet serve you but poor Jack?" And having tantalized the giant for a while, he gave him a most weighty knock with his pickaxe on the very crown of his head, and killed him on the spot. Then Jack filled up the pit with earth, and went to search the cave, which he found contained much treasure. When the magistrates heard of this, they made a declaration he should henceforth be termed Jack the Giant Killer, and presented him with a sword and a belt, on which were written these words embroidered in letters of gold: "Here's the right valiant Cornish man who slew the giant Cormoran." The news of Jack's victory soon spread over all the west of England, so that another giant, named Blunderbore, hearing of it, vowed to be avenged on Jack, if ever he should light on him. This giant was the lord of an enchanted castle situated in the midst of a lonesome wood. Now Jack, about 4 months afterwards, walking near this wood in his journey to Wales, being weary, seated himself near a pleasant fountain and fell fast asleep. While he was sleeping, the giant, coming there for water, discovered him, and knew him to be the far-famed Jack the Giant Killer by the lines written on his belt. Without ado he took Jack on his shoulders and carried him towards his castle. Now as they passed through a thicket, the rustling of the boughs wakened Jack, who was strangely surprised to find himself in the clutches of the giant. His terror was only begun, for on entering the castle he saw the ground strewed with human bones, and the giant told him his own would ere long be among them. After this the giant locked poor Jack in an immense chamber, leaving him there while he went to fetch another giant, his brother, living in the same wood, who might share in the meal on Jack. After waiting some time, Jack, on going to the window, beheld afar off the 2 giants coming towards the castle. "Now," quoth Jack to himself, "my death or my deliverance is at hand." Now there were strong cords in a corner of the room in which Jack was, and 2 of these he took, and made a strong noose at the end, and while the giants were unlocking the iron gate of the castle, he threw the ropes over each of their heads. Then he drew the other ends across a beam, and pulled with all his might, so that he throttled them. Then, when he saw they were black in the face, he slid down the rope, and drawing his sword, slew them both. Then, taking the giant's keys and unlocking the rooms, he found 3 fair ladies tied by the hair of their heads and almost starved to death. "Sweet ladies," quoth Jack, "I have destroyed this monster and his brutish brother, and obtained your liberties." This said, he presented them with the keys, and so proceeded on his journey to Wales. Jack made the best of his way by travelling as fast as he could, but lost his road and was benighted, and could not find any habitation until, coming into a narrow valley, he found a large house, and in order to get shelter took courage to knock at the gate. But what was his surprise when there came forth a monstrous giant with 2 heads! Yet he did not appear so fiery as the others were, for he was a Welsh giant, and what he did was by private and secret malice, under the false show of friendship. Jack, having told his condition to the giant, was shown into a bedroom, where in the dead of night he heard his host in another apartment muttering these words: "Though here you lodge with me this night, you shall not see the morning light. My club shall dash your brains outright." "Say'st thou so?" quoth Jack. "That is like one of your Welsh tricks, yet I hope to be cunning enough for you." Then, getting out of bed, he laid a billet in the bed in his stead, and hid himself in a corner of the room. At the dead time of the night, in came the Welsh giant, who struck several heavy blows on the bed with his club, thinking he had broken every bone in Jack's skin. The next morning, Jack, laughing in his sleeve, gave him hearty thanks for his night's lodging. "How have you rested?" quoth the giant. "Did you not feel anything in the night?" "No," quoth Jack, "nothing but a rat, which gave me 2 or 3 slaps with her tail." With that, greatly wondering, the giant led Jack to breakfast, bringing him a bowl containing 4 gallons of hasty pudding. Being loth to let the giant think it too much for him, Jack put a large leather bag under his loose coat, in such a way that he could convey the pudding into it without it being perceived. Then, telling the giant he would show him a trick, taking a knife, Jack ripped open the bag, and out came all the hasty pudding, whereupon saying, "Odd splutters her nails, her can do that trick herself," the monster took the knife, and ripping open his belly, fell down dead. Now it happened in these days that King Arthur's only son asked his father to give him a large sum of money, in order that he might go and seek his fortune in the Principality of Wales, where lived a beautiful lady possessed of 7 evil spirits. The king did his best to persuade his son from it, but in vain, so at last gave way, and the prince set out with 2 horses, one loaded with money, the other for himself to ride upon. Now after several days' travel, he came to a market town in Wales, where he beheld a vast crowd of people gathered together. The prince asked the reason of it, and was told that they had arrested a corpse for several large sums of money which the deceased owed when he died. The prince replied that it was a pity creditors should be so cruel, and said, "Go, bury the dead, and let his creditors come to my lodging, and there their debts shall be paid." They came in such great numbers that before night he had only 2pence left for himself. Now Jack the Giant Killer, coming that way, was so taken with the generosity of the prince that he desired to be his servant. This being agreed upon, the next morning they set forward on their journey together, when, as they were riding out of the town, an old woman called after the prince, saying, "He has owed me 2pence these 7 years. Pray pay me as well as the rest." Putting his hand to his pocket, the prince gave the woman all he had left, so that after their day's food, which cost what small spell Jack had by him, they were without a penny between them. When the sun got low, the king's son said, "Jack, since we have no money, where can we lodge this night?" But Jack replied, "Master, we'll do well enough, for I have an uncle lives within 2 miles of this place. He is a huge and monstrous giant with 3 heads. He'll fight 500 men in armor, and make them fly before him." "Alas," quoth the prince, "what shall we do there? He'll certainly chop us up in a mouthful." "Nay, we are scarce enough to fill one of his hollow teeth." "It is no matter for that," quoth Jack. "I myself will go before and prepare the way for you. Therefore, stop here and wait till I return." Jack then rode away at full speed, and coming to the gate of the castle, he knocked so loud that he made the neighboring hills resound. The giant roared out at this like thunder. "Who's there?" Jack answered, "None but your poor cousin Jack." Quoth he, "What news of my poor cousin Jack?" He replied, "Dear uncle, heavy news, good wot." "Prithee," quoth the giant, "what heavy news can come to me? I am a giant with 3 heads, and besides, thou knowest I can fight 500 men in armor, and make them fly like chaff before the wind." "Oh, but," quoth Jack, "here's the king's son a-comin', with 1,000 men in armor to kill you and destroy all that you have." "Oh, cousin Jack," said the giant, "this is heavy news indeed. I will immediately run and hide myself, and thou shalt lock, bolt, and bar me in, and keep the keys until the prince is gone." Having secured the giant, Jack fetched his master, and when they made themselves heartily merry, whilst the poor giant lay trembling in a vault under the ground. Early in the morning, Jack furnished his master with a fresh supply of gold and silver, and then sent him 3 miles forward on his journey, at which time the prince was pretty well out of the spell of the giant. Jack then returned and let the giant out of the vault, who asked what he should give him for keeping the castle from destruction. "Why," quoth Jack, "I want nothing but the old coat and cap, together with the old rusty sword and slippers, which are at your bed's head." Quoth the giant, "You know not what you ask. They are the most precious things I have. The coat will keep you invisible, the cap will tell you all you want to know, the sword cuts asunder whatever you strike, and the shoes are of extraordinary swiftness. But you have been very serviceable to me, therefore take them with all my heart." Jack thanked his uncle, and went off with them. He soon overtook his master, and they quickly arrived at the house of the lady the prince sought, who, finding the prince to be a suitor, prepared a splendid banquet for him. After the repast was concluded, she told him she had a task for him. She wiped his mouth with a handkerchief, saying, "You must show me that handkerchief tomorrow morning, or else you will lose your head." With that she put it in her bosom. The prince went to bed in great sorrow, but Jack's cap of knowledge informed him how it was to be obtained. In the middle of the night she called upon her familiar spirit to carry her to Lucifer. But Jack put on his coat of darkness and his shoes of swiftness, and was there as soon as she was. When she entered the place of the old one, she gave the handkerchief to old Lucifer, who laid it upon a shelf, whence Jack took it and brought it to his master, who showed it to the lady next day, and so saved his life. On that day she gave the prince a kiss, and told him he must show her the lips tomorrow morning that she kissed last night, or lose his head. "Ah," he replied, "if you kiss none but mine, I will." "That is neither here nor there," said she. "If you do not, death's your portion." At midnight she went as before, and was angry with old Lucifer for letting the handkerchief go. "But now," quoth she, "I will be too hard for the king's son, for I will kiss thee, and he is to show me thy lips." Which she did, and Jack, when she was not standing by, cut off Lucifer's head, and brought it under invisible coat to his master, who, the next morning, pulled it out by the horns before the lady. This broke the enchantment, and the evil spirit left her, and she appeared in all her beauty. They were married the next morning, and soon after went to the court of King Arthur, where Jack, for his many exploits, was made one of the knights of the Round Table. Jack soon went searching for giants again, but he had not ridden far when he saw a cave, near the entrance of which he beheld a giant sitting upon a block of timber, with a knotted iron club by his side. His goggle eyes were like flames of fire, his countenance grim and ugly, and his cheeks like a couple of large flitches of bacon, while the bristles of his beard resembled rods of iron wire, and the locks that hung down upon his brawny shoulders were like curled snakes or hissing adders. Jack alighted from his horse, and putting on the coat of darkness, went up close to the giant, and said softly, "Ah, are you there? It will not be long before I take you fast by the beard." The giant all this while could not see him on account of his invisible coat, so that Jack, coming up close to the monster, struck a blow with his sword at his head, but missing his aim, he cut off the nose instead. At this the giant roared like claps of thunder, and began to lay about him with his iron club like one stark mad. But Jack, running behind, drove his sword up to the hilt in the giant's back, so that he fell down dead. This done, Jack cut off the giant's head, and sent it, with his brothers also, to King Arthur, by a wagoner he hired for that purpose. Jack now resolved to enter the giant's cave in search of his treasure, and passing along through a great many windings and turnings, he came at length to a large room paved with freestone, at the upper end of which was a boiling cauldron, and on the right hand a large table, at which the giant used to dine. Then he came to a window barred with iron, through which he looked and beheld a vast number of miserable captives, who, seeing him, cried out, "Alas, young man, art thou come to be one amongst us in this miserable den?" "Ay," quoth Jack, "but pray tell me, what is the meaning of your captivity?" "We are kept here," said one, "till such time as the giants have a wish to feast, and then the fattest among us is slaughtered, and many are the times they have dined upon murdered men." "So say you," quoth Jack, and straightway unlocked the gate and let them free, who all rejoiced like condemned men at the sight of a pardon. Then, searching the giant's coffers, he shared the gold and silver equally amongst them, and took them to a neighbouring castle, where they all feasted and made merry over their deliverance. But in the midst of all this mirth, a messenger brought news that one Thunderdell, a giant with 2 heads, having heard of the death of his kinsman, had come from the northern dales to be revenged on Jack, and was within a mile of the castle, the country people flying before him like chaff. But Jack was not a bit daunted, and said, "Let him come. I have a tool to pick his teeth. And you, ladies and gentlemen, walk out into the garden, and you shall witness this giant Thunderdell's death and destruction." The castle was situated in the midst of a small island, surrounded by a moat 30 feet deep and 20 feet wide, over which lay a drawbridge. So Jack employed men to cut through this bridge on both sides nearly to the middle, and then, dressing himself in his invisible coat, he marched against the giant with his sword of sharpness. Although the giant could not see Jack, he smelt his approach, and cried out in these words, "Fee, fi, fo, fum! I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he live or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Say'st thou so?" said Jack. "Then thou'rt a monstrous miller indeed." The giant cried out again, "Art thou that villain who killed my kinsman? Then I will tear thee with my teeth, suck thy blood, and grind thy bones to powder." "You'll have to catch me first," quoth Jack, and throwing off his invisible coat so that the giant might see him, and putting on his shoes of swiftness, he ran from the giant, who followed like a walking castle, so that the very foundations of the earth seemed to shake at every step. Jack led him a long dance in order that the gentlemen and ladies might see, and at last, to end the matter, ran lightly over the drawbridge, the giant in full speed pursuing him with his club. Then, coming to the middle of the bridge, the giant's great weight broke it down, and he tumbled headlong into the water, where he rolled and wallowed like a whale. Jack, standing by the moat, laughed at him all the while, but though the giant foamed to hear him scoff, and plunged from place to place in the moat, yet he could not get out to be revenged. Jack at length got a cart rope and cast it over the two heads of the giant, and drew him ashore by a team of horses, and then cut off both his heads with his sword of sharpness, and sent them to King Arthur. After some time spent in mirth and pastime, Jack, taking leave of the knights and ladies, set out for new adventures. Through many woods he passed, and came at length to the foot of a high mountain. Here, late at night, he found a lonesome house, and knocked at the door, which was opened by an aged man with a head as white as snow. "Father," said Jack, "can you lodge a benighted traveller that has lost his way?" "Yes," said the old man, "you are right welcome to my poor cottage." Whereupon Jack entered, and down they sat together, and the old man began to speak as follows. "Son, I see by your belt you are the great conqueror of giants, and behold, my son, on the top of this mountain is an enchanted castle. This is kept by a giant named Galligantua, and he, by the help of an old conjurer, betrays many knights and ladies into his castle, where by magic art they are transformed into sundry shapes and forms. But above all, I grieve for a duke's daughter, whom they fetched from her father's garden, carrying her through the air in a burning chariot drawn by fiery dragons, when they secured her within the castle and transformed her into a white hind. And though many knights have tried to break the enchantment and work her deliverance, yet no one could accomplish it, on account of two dreadful griffins, which are placed at the castle gate, and which destroy everyone who comes near. But you, my son, may pass by them undiscovered, where on the gates of the castle you will find engraven in large letters how the spell may be broken." Jack gave the old man his hand, and promised that in the morning he would venture his life to free the lady. In the morning Jack arose, and put on his invisible coat and magic cap and shoes, and prepared himself for the fray. Now, when he had reached the top of the mountain, he soon discovered the two fiery griffins, but passed them without fear, because of his invisible coat. When he had got beyond them, he found upon the gates of the castle a golden trumpet hung by a silver chain, under which these lines were engraved. "Whoever shall this trumpet blow shall soon the giant overthrow, and break the black enchantment straight, so all shall be in happy state." Jack had no sooner read this, but he blew the trumpet, at which the castle trembled to its vast foundations, and the giant and conjurer were in horrid confusion, biting their thumbs and tearing their hair, knowing their wicked reign was at an end. Then the giant, stooping to take up his club, Jack at one blow cut off his head, whereupon the conjurer, mounting up into the air, was carried away in a whirlwind. Then the enchantment was broken, and all the lords and ladies who had so long been transformed into birds and beasts returned to their proper shapes, and the castle vanished away in a cloud of smoke. This being done, the head of Galligantua was likewise, in the usual manner, conveyed to the court of King Arthur, where, the very next day, Jack followed, with the knights and ladies who had been delivered. Whereupon, as a reward for his good services, the king prevailed upon the duke to bestow his daughter in marriage on honest Jack. So married were they, and the whole kingdom was filled with joy at the wedding, Furthermore, the king bestowed on Jack a noble castle, with a very beautiful estate thereto belonging, where he and his lady lived in great joy and happiness all the rest of their days. The end.
And we are back. So, what is your favorite part or version of this story?
Okay, so my favorite version of giant killer thingies is the Beanstalk Tale that was published sometime in the 1870s in George Cruikshank's Fairy Library, and it is called The History of Jack and the Beanstalk, and it is a much longer story than most versions. I know, shocker, that I would like the longer story.
What?
Oh.
No.
But anyway, this version has Jack being spoiled and the family being poor, as usual. But they are poor because Danish pirates attack the town.
Attacked by pirates?
And most of the I was waiting for that. Yes.
I was about to say it. You beat me. I'm leaving all this in.
So they are poor because Danish pirates attacked the town, and most of the people who weren't killed ran off.
Murdered by pirates is
When
good.
Jack,
Oh, he said that.
I love you too. Okay, so when Jack goes looking for work, he meets a fairy who needs his help. And she tells Jack that his father is still alive. Jack's father was a Saxon knight who was attacked by a Danish giant and imprisoned in the giant's castle. The fairy has a plan that involves Jack planting the magic bean that she gives him and then going into the giant's castle 3 times. The first time he gets the golden hen, and another time to get the harp, both of which are actually the fairy's sisters who need rescuing.
Well, that's a family tree worthy of Zeus.
So, on Jack's 3rd trip to the castle, he gets to rescue his father and some others who were also imprisoned. The story has a good-natured giantess who is the wife of the giant, and a dwarf servant of the giant who ends up helping out Jack in the end. And I think I just like that version because of the fact that Jack wasn't just a lazy thief, but he was actually trying to rescue prisoners.
I do tend to appreciate a less felonious Jack.
Less douchebaggery Jack. In the 2013 movie, Jack the Giant Slayer includes the Beanstalk Tale. My favorite Jack and the Beanstalk is the Mickey one with Donald Duck throwing a temper tantrum and the singing giant. Fee, fi, fo, fum, fi, fee. Disney, don't give me a cease and desist. Jack is not my favorite character. He's arrogant and a bit of a douchebag in this story. I think I like King Arthur's son better. He at least seems to have heard of humility and charity and other admirable qualities. I guess this isn't the Mordred that we all know and love. So, yeah.
True. I do love the Mickey, but not that same one. I like the little tailor where he kills the flies and says he kills 5 with 1 blow, and all the townsfolk think he means giants. It always makes me laugh.
He just goes with it.
1 blow. He does. He's like, oh no, the king thinks I did it. Now I must act like this forever.
Well, in this version, my first impression is that Jack must have been some sort of superhero to dig a 22-foot wide and deep pit in just one night. Though if the giant was like 18 feet tall, his arms still should have been able to easily reach 4 feet to pull himself out. Though Jack managing to reach...
He worked on legs, not arms.
He didn't lift.
Bro, do you even lift?
The Jack managing to reach down the 4 feet to hit the giant in the head with the pickaxe made me rethink my image of Jack as a boy. I mean, I'm thinking that this Jack, son of a farmer, is about as boyish as Worf, son of Mode. Then later, when he claims kinship with one of the giants, I began to realize I probably wasn't far off the mark.
It's those big Cornish farm boys.
Interesting. And he did have insight into how to kill a giant from somewhere. I was surprised King Arthur has a son in this, and he's nice, like Polly said. So I'm so used to his only child being born a bastard from an incestuous relationship, so I had to recalibrate my thoughts.
Yeah, you and me both. This nameless son was definitely not Mordred. Not with how easily he gave away his wealth.
The people got a little fast and loose with Arthur's name after a while. Or Arthur got a little fast and loose with something.
I mean, true. I did hear the same thing about Jack, though, in all the fairy tales. In the 1960-ish movie with the claymation giants that I adore, Arthur has a daughter that gets kidnapped. And I'm just not used to Arthur getting a happily ever after, even if the happily ever after does get kidnapped.
It's easy enough to insert daughters into tales because no one cares how many there are to begin with when the stories are about the adventures of men.
That does go back to the biblical perspective where they only count male members of the tribes.
Yes, there were 600,000 exactly.
600,002. That reminds me of this scientific study that I read, and one of the scientists came out saying he had to fudge the numbers just a tiny little bit because the math ended up being perfect, and they thought that no one would believe their measurements if it was a perfectly round number. I can't remember what it was, though. I think it was some Arctic exploration measurements.
Yeah, people be like, "Oh yeah, you measured that." Wink, wink.
Right? And you're doing like the measurements in the Arctic. People would maybe expect you to maybe try and skip out on some of those.
I like that Jack left the one giant alive. You know, the one he called his uncle or cousin. That one at least was sitting at home, minding his own business, until Jack came along and bamboozled him, robbed him, and threw a party while he was hiding in the basement in fear for his life. The poor guy. He certainly does not deserve killing.
And then he thanked him for it.
Right. How can I repay you?
Well, maybe that giant's peaceful behavior is what earned him the familial label. It's one thing to murder rampaging foreigners and something entirely different to kill one of the locals.
True. My favorite part of the version I read was thinking that an 8-foot humanoid could carry 6 oxen that are probably over 1,000 pounds each with a belt of 400-pound pigs.
Yeah, they were like carry cattle and mini pigs.
But still, I can't even carry 6 chihuahuas at once, and I'm only 3 feet shorter than that dude.
Yeah, but that's because chihuahuas are all trying to eviscerate you.
Oh, okay, fine. Hamsters then. I can't hold a bouquet of hamsters unless they're infants.
I once held a bouquet of cats, like 6 of them.
Huh. That's a decent bouquet. Were they all different colors?
Yes.
Nice. So how long did that last?
They're a pretty tight clouder, so they didn't care.
Okay. You made me do a double take with you saying he was 8 feet tall. So I went back to my version and looked, and it definitely described him as being 18 feet tall and about 3 yards around the waist. So he was a hefty dude.
Right. Well, 18 feet in your version does make more sense, but at 1,000 to 3,000 pounds each, I refer back to the Chihuahuas.
No, 18 feet tall would definitely make better sense, but that's still a lot of beef. Like, he just strapped a stringer of Corollas to his back. my truck weighs 3,000 pounds.
Well, true, but, they kind of also had to be dead already, no wiggling involved.
Biting.
Kicking and biting and trying to escape. And just, the sounds. So, but if he killed them all, maybe he just knocked them unconscious. Because if he killed them all to take them back, he would have had to eat them right away because they didn't have refrigerators. Wait,
what part of
where was this?
9 feet around did you not hear? The boy had a hefty.
If he dressed them out, they would be lighter.
That's true.
So he killed them and dressed them out, and he just carried the dressed out meat back to his place. So no bones and horns and hooves.
Bloody meat. Gross.
And that's that would piss off the villagers even more because it'd probably bring in predators. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Classic.
So, ah, now getting back to favorite parts of the story. I'm not gonna lie. I did get a childish burst of joy when I saw the fee fi fo fum rhyme in
I
full
did too.
in this version.
It was totally fan service for real. Beep, 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 beep. I don't know this.
Okay, so it wasn't that fee fi fo fum. It was the old, fee fi fo fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman thing. But it was my favorite part of the Beanstalk Tale when I was small, and it was an unexpected treat to have it appear in a story that was so completely different from my childhood tale. It was a lot of fun seeing where it originally came from, probably. And it made a lot more sense with Jack being hidden by the cloak of darkness. Though why he took off the cloak before putting on the shoes of swiftness made no sense to me. I mean, is he only allowed to equip one magical item at a time or something?
Someone trip on the hem. Have you ever tried to put on sneakers with a long skirt?
I mean, yes, like yesterday. But they don't even go in the same armor slot. Come on, Jack.
Exactly.
All right. So what is your least favorite part or version of this story?
Yo, just Jack being a douchebag. He did a lot of beheading. He had like beheading express mail to King Arthur going on. It was like just heads rolling everywhere.
Oh, God, yes. Even though this is a story that goes from one act of violence to the next, which, is not usually my fave, there actually isn't anything really objectionable to it.
You don't count the
It
beheadings.
is exactly as, well, but it is exactly as advertised by the title, However, reading it did make me realize one of the reasons why little girls tend to read lots of princess stories. Those are the only fairy tales with female characters. Both of the women in this story were mentioned in a total of 4 paragraphs. I went back and counted. And the only one with lines got nothing more to say once she was no longer part of a cursed challenge.
It definitely does not pass the Bechdel test. In the one that I read, I almost gave credit to Jack for not forcing one of the first 2 women that he freed from the giant to marry him until the Duchess was forced to marry him, and then I just gave up at that point.
Oh, yeah. My version had the 2 girls at the beginning, too, but they were a one-line mention that I completely forgot about. Not what I would call characters, those poor little female NPCs.
Oh, bless their hearts. I also think that the prejudice against the Welsh in this part is pretty bad, but outsmarting him with a trick that teenagers use to sneak out at night just kind of makes it silly, and the Ash lad did it better anyway.
Yeah, and then the giant literally goes herder. Ashlad did the squeezing water from a stone trick, which I think is pretty clever, with the cheese, which is an element you also see in the Brave Little Tailor. But I mean, it is a Cornish tale, so making fun of the Welsh is normal.
I do like the cheese trick as well, where they pretend that it's a stone and they can crush it and they get liquid out. It's a pretty good trick. I'm going to try it on someone someday. So, what are the original lessons that you think that this story was trying to convey?
Well, obviously, boys should be strong and aggressive and arrogant and go on adventures and take what's not theirs. And if they do so, then they get a beautiful wife bestowed upon them.
I definitely agree with the arrogant part. But I do think that this story is actually one of those that tries to make the case for being better to be quick-witted than a warrior. Yes, he is a giant killer. But in his opening description, he is called brisk and of a ready, lively wit. Now, he would also need to be strong in order to dig that massive pit and actually cut off heads with a sword. But it is usually his ability to outthink the giants that lets him win the day. I mean, the rope through the prison bars to strangle the 2 giants was pure MacGyver.
Yeah, I like that detail. They had a giant at either end, so he didn't have to do any work. Their struggling just worked against each other.
I did have the MacGyver thought, too, when I was reading this. He was a well-rounded, arrogant prick.
Huh. You know, I think I may have dated him in high school.
Huh. I guess I just got your sloppy seconds then.
Not me. Those were the guys I knocked over and sat on till they said uncle. I didn't have a lot of dates in high school.
Huh. And it remains a mystery as to why. To this day. So what do you think the modern lesson would be?
If you're a giant, make friends with your townspeople, so they'll stand up to any random adventurers who happen along looking for monsters to slay. Like, excuse you, this is our giant, move along.
Or they just go knock them down and sit on them.
You know, this story has a vague sort of pretty as pretty does lesson in a roundabout sort of way. All of these giants became targets because they were causing problems. They kept imprisoning and eating the local folk, making a real nuisance of themselves. Then here is this half-breed giant Jack.
Which we have hereby determined is a fact, canonically speaking.
He's charming, fun at parties, and runs around rescuing people and making sure to promote good public relations, by sending proof of his good deeds back to the authorities.
Yeah, heads really work for that.
Oh, God. It keeps the people of the kingdom thrilled to see him instead of muttering rumors about his mother and her family.
Yeah, just about the heads
So
he sends back.
So perhaps the modern lesson is your actions are more important than your heritage. He did ride the wave of public relations from farmer to owning a beautiful estate.
Now, you may ask yourself, is this his beautiful estate? Is this his beautiful wife?
That song's going to be stuck in my head for weeks now.
You're welcome.
Mailing heads is just endearing to the public. It's just such a nice sentiment.
Put a stamp on that.
So, all the poor mail people.
Oh. It was a cart that he hired for that purpose. That cartman knew what he was getting into.
No, not him.
Yeah.
We don't know that for sure. Especially the giants that had two heads. How did he How did he make sure that everybody knew it was a 2 or 3 headed giant?
That had to get the clavicle included, so it's attached.
Yeah.
So then that would be
you get the branching of the neck.
Extra weight in the back of that wagon and all of that riding meat. That poor wagon driver. I'm just saying.
Head delivery driver, cartman. He's like, respect my authority. Heads for the king. What about cheesy moves?
Not Cartman. Okay, so in closing, what do you think happened after the story?
I think the Duke's daughter eventually got tired of Jack sitting around the dinner table, picking his teeth, and talking about what a great person he was. He definitely gives off some serious Gaston vibes.
But what could she do about it? She was a gift.
Bestowed.
Poor little femme NPC. Well, okay, here we go. Since Jack was son of a farmer, that means his giant bloodlines came through his mother.
I'm so happy that we're just running with this. I embrace this canon event.
Exactly. I mean, he called the giant uncle and cousin.
The giant even recognized him, so it wasn't even a secret. It was a known phenomenon.
Right. So I think that heritage played a big part in him having a difficult time settling down to normal life. He grew bored with country life, and he went to war with the rest of the knights when Camelot fell. The question is, did he become part of Constantine of Cornwall's tyrannical reign before he repented and became a monk? There are vague references and slurs about Constantine's mother as the unclean lioness of Daemonia. What if she is also a giantess and Jack is related to Constantine through their shared giantess heritage? Perhaps Jack eventually joins his mother's people in Scotland and is actually able to be happy as a wild man of the Highlands.
You've put a lot of thought into this.
The Jack lore gets deeper. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, this is what happens when a teacher/writer has too much time on their hands during summer break.
Oh, you mean magic happens? Agreed. So I think that Jack finally learned to equip all of his magical items at once, and he became a superhero a la Captain Hammer.
And by hammer, he means his hammer.
Okay, so Peanut Gallery told about a D&D campaign once where they were meant to cross a desert, and so they had to worry about stocking up on water and carrying enough to get them across. Only one of the players was playing a giant who just picked up the whole water cart and toted it along.
So no mage?
I didn't need one with a giant to carry the buffalo.
Well, if I was the DM, I would have had the town hate them for taking their water source. Congrats. You just became the main villain in my next campaign.
Yeah, now it's not an adventure quest, it's a flight for their lives. Hey, new character sheets, start rolling. We just turned this whole campaign upside down.
Now, when they come back from whatever they were doing across the desert and the whole town turns against them.
Meet him at the edge of the desert with the flaming torches and pitchforks.
Thanks for joining us today. Check us out on Patreon. You can help us meet our small goal of breaking even and covering our expenses. Your support helps pay for all of the things that podcasting requires and helps keep this show alive and growing. If you can't afford to support us financially, go give us a good review, subscribe or follow, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to fact check us and offer suggestions to make our show better for you. You can also send us an email at lostinrevisionpodcast@gmail.com.
There's a lot more waiting for us all at the end of the road.